am Larry Hall. I'm the president of a company called Wheel Trailer Leasing. And with this presentation, most of our supply chain students, the supply chain business. This is really about supply chain, and I'll call it a bit of a history lesson too. So I want to talk about the trailer rental and leasing market over the last 10 years, because we've had, if you go back to 2007 to 2025, it's been a crisis du jour in American business. And I've lived, unfortunately, as an executive through all of them, starting with the great financial crisis in 2008, 9, and 10, and working our way out of that, which I'll say 2015 is sort of when we came out of it and it started to get moving, and then ultimately going into a pandemic, which no one in 100 years had gone through, so no one knew how to navigate that. And it definitely wreaked havoc on the supply chain, and it continues to wreak havoc on the supply chain today. So we'll talk about all of those things, kind of 2015 to present, and then I think the industry is going and the market is going 2026 and beyond. Okay, so let's get started. All right, Ruben, already my clicker's not working. Do I got to be closer to you?
One leg.
Oh, geez.
I think Ruben's going to be your clicker.
Clicker. All right, there we go. So first, just a little introduction to trailer rental leasing. So these are companies that provide trailing assets to the U.S. trucking industry, just like the one being pulled by that red truck right there. And you're going to have to click for me, brother. Hit it. Just hit it on it. Just click and it should go. And these companies supply dry vans mostly, also flatbed trailers, refrigerated trailers, lift-gated trailers, or other specified trailers based on whatever the application is. Profile, so we rent trailers to national companies with seasonal needs like Amazon, UPS, FedEx. We're going into the busy time of year for us, so pretty much August to December is our peak time of year because of the holiday season, but there are other peaks that happen throughout the year as well. We'll also rent or lease to large trucking companies that have a specific need. So this is where the Jay behind calling us and saying, hey, I just landed a contract, it's only 3 years. It's for the Ford Motor Company. We need an auto spec, which is automotive spec dry van, which is very different than a regular dry van that hauls Amazon packages down the road. Will you build them for us if we give you a 3-year deal? Yes, we'll absolutely do that. That's the business that we're in. So, and then the big piece is, well, it's about 40% of our business, middle market trucking that uses lessors to finance rolling stock. So this is most trucking companies in the United States. Like I think actually 95% of the trucking companies in the US have less than 10 tractors. So they don't have the money to go out and buy trailing equipment. They'll use a company like us as a way to finance that equipment for their business. So quick introduction to the business and what we do and how we impact supply chain. But we also do manufacturing, warehousing, retail office, and a storage trailer too. So vast customer base. About 25% of what we do is storage, and everything else would be over the road, cartage, and transportation. Yes.
Typically for B, or is this customer?
They're all B2B. Yeah, we rent to individuals, and we don't rent to owner operators. So there's reasons for that. Collecting the money is also a big thing you got to do, and we don't want to do that with owner operators and individual customers. So, short players. Sure, people in this business. This is a company called Extra Lease. You've probably seen the trailers rolling up and down the road. Premier Trailer Leasing, I know, is a partner of UNT. They recruit here every spring. There's a new that happened in the last year. It's a company called 10 or Transportation Equipment Network. Coast to coast yet, but they're getting close to that. Then there's another company called PLM that's refrigerated trailers only. They are national, but they only do refrigerated, so they will not do dry vans or flatbeds or lift-gated dry vans. And then there are lots of regionals. These are the big ones. McKinney Trailer Leasing, you've probably seen them around here. They have a big presence in Texas. They're mostly West and Midwest. Metro Trailer Leasing, you'll see their trailers running around here too, but the East and the South for the most part. Wheel, which is us. We're mostly West. We're about 10,000 assets in our fleet. And we have a couple of Midwest locations. We just opened in Chicago and Detroit, but everything else is Denver, yes, to California. And then there's another company, Stoughton Trailer Leasing, the same size as us, and they're in the Midwest and the South. So there's other players in this business that we pay attention to, but they're very regionalized and small. So, but there's a lot of competition out there. Thanks, Ruben. Okay, so think about this business and all these crises that we've been through. Actually, I thought when I graduated from college, I was going to work for the Ford Motor Company, and I was going to be there for 40 years and retire, just like all the guys I saw, men and women in that company when I started, who were retiring, living these wonderful lives post corporate life. And that was my dream. That's what I thought was going to happen. That didn't happen because of all these crises. The first one happened in 2006, when the domestic manufacturers were basically going broke, and the Ford Motor Company laid off 2/3 of the white collar workforce. I was part of the 2/3. So what I would tell you, going through all these crises, is being curious about the environment you're in, and open, and flexible will allow you to win. Never stop learning. That would be the lesson I've learned over the last 30 years. It's worked out for me, but what I also learned in this environment, starting with the great financial crisis in 2008, is paying attention to macroeconomic indicators is really important to forecasting, especially when a black swan event comes along and disrupts everything. And trying to understand when we're going to come out of that black swan event and get back into what I'll call a normalized market, or whatever the side of the market is important. And when I think back to my 8, 9, and 10 experience, I can tell you, because it's just, branded in my brain. In 2009, it was so bad, I thought it was never going to end. But it did. And we came out of it. And by 2015, we were humming, which is what I'm going to show you. What's going on right now is similar to the financial crisis, not as deep, but it's a little bit longer, and it can feel like it's never going to end, but it will. And the indicators that will tell you that it will are these macroeconomic indicators, especially in the durable goods side of the economy, which is supply chain and trucking. So the things we look at, first of all, is the total of dry vans available. I think, well, how do we know that? It's a good question, because they're not all registered. But the one thing is how many get built every year. And so just in general, you can run one of those things over the road in an over-the-road application for about 12 years. So if I just take everything that's been built for the last 12 years and add it up, I'm going to get a pretty good idea what the total industry is. So I start with big picture, what does the total look like, and then move it down to my little micro level, and then try to reverse engineer the forecast to that. So the first thing to look at is, well, how much is actually available? The next thing is, how many trucking tons of freight are rolling through the system? This is really important, because if you look at tonnage, you're going to get this huge number. I'm not concerned about what goes a little bit by ship or barge or train. But really what's going to impact me is how much of that gets consumed by trucking. So in the United States, it's about 75% of the total tonnage that goes through the United States system is going to get pulled by a truck at some point in time. So total trucking tonnage is really important. Annual input TEUs, so I'm concerned about boats, but I'm more concerned about the containers that are on those ships and what's in those containers. And we'll talk about what happened during the COVID crisis to container volumes and what was actually in them. So TEUs are what that means. TEU, it's a 20-foot equivalent unit. So that's the standard size of a container going back to the 50s. Now, but all the freight gets measured in 20-foot equivalent units. So it's an important metric to understand when you're looking at overseas shipping. Okay, Ruben, next. Total U.S. home sales. Housing drives manufacturing, and it drives trucking in the United States. Next. Manufacturing PMI. Everybody know what PMI is? You want to guess what PMI is? This is good. I'm teaching you something. So Purchasing Managers Index. So we go out and survey all these purchasing managers that are in the manufacturing sector, and we say, hey, are you buying materials to produce the finished goods or not? And they tell us, how much, yes, no, what they think. And they take all the information, they create an index. So when that index is 50 or greater, it means the manufacturing section of the economy is growing. When it's below 50, it's shrinking. Okay, just simple terms. So we look at manufacturing PMI. Next. So TUs are important. It's kind of giving you an idea what the supply of retail is. A lot of it is imported, the stuff that ends up in the Amazon truck. But e-commerce as a percent of retail is really important, right? So traditionally, you go back 25 years, all those TUs got put on a truck and it ended up in a warehouse, which ultimately ended up in a retail store, and then you went and got it. Well, that has shifted a ton, as everybody knows. Now it goes into a warehouse and goes on another truck and it gets delivered to your house. So that's important for how much trailing equipment is required to move all that product and how many times is it going to get touched. Next. Retail inventory level. So this is important as well. The next metric will kind of indicate why. So if retailers are destocking, which is what happened at the beginning of COVID, obviously there are less TVs coming in, there's less freight to be moved. If they get into a period where they're optimistic, they'll increase their inventory. So there's a period of time where inventories are increasing where sales trail. But that's important for us to know because more equipment is required to get that inventory where it's got to go. Okay, and then the last one, there's two more. Annual US GDP. I look at it, something too, but this bifurcated economy right now. So with the service side and the durable goods side, I will tell you for the last 3.5 years, the durable goods side has been in a rolling recession, while the service side of the economy has continued to grow. It's weird. Again, something in my 30 plus years of business has never happened to me. So, hey, one more great experience, right? Eventually I'm going to retire, but I'll come back and teach everybody about this stuff. These are things you need to look at. So we look at GDP, but we're more concerned about the durable goods side than we are the services side. And the last thing, which is really important, it's been in the news obviously this last week, is the Fed funds rate. Okay? So metrics, if we track we have this data going back to 2007. So we look at all of them in aggregate, and we sort of make guesses based on where we think things are headed. So, but before we tell you where I think things are headed, let's take you back in history and let's look at the period from 2015 to 2019. Yes, okay. So 2015 to 2019, just to sort of level set the market, it was 1.6 to 1.9 trailers. That's what OTR means. 53-foot dry vans is what I'm looking at, and cartage trailers combined in North America for transportation. Okay, next. Dry van production was actually pretty stable. The industry is building between 180,000 and 200,000 a year. That's more obviously than right after the financial crisis, but I would say it's a pretty stable market. About the same number on the other side of the equation is getting scrapped, right? So the supply is not really growing. It's probably a little bit, you can see it went from 1.6 to 1.9 over a 5-year period. I'd take that all day long. I'm going to call that a really stable market. I can forecast in this market. Next. Total annual home sales are between 5.7 and 6.1. So this is existing homes combined. This is really important because whenever you buys a home, I don't care what your economic status is, you're going to do something to your house. You're going to paint a room, you're going to replace carpet, you're going to do tile, whatever it is. That stuff goes in the truck. So home sales drive manufacturing. All that stuff's got to get manufactured, and it drives trucking. Right? So home sales are very important. This is a very good, very stable market. It doesn't get much better than that. Okay, next. GDP, just fine. This is the total economy, service side and the durable goods side. We're kind of good. They're in the perfect ratio where they should be. We're clipping like the 2% range. Again, very stable, very predictable. And manufacturing PMI, remember, anything over 50 is good, right? We look at that as a good sign. So PMI is from 54.7 to 52.7. It's really kind of low mid-50s for most of this period. It drops to 52.7 towards the end of 2019, which is the first time we hear the word COVID-19, right? I remember the first time I heard it was November of 2019. I didn't know what it was. They were talking about Wuhan, China. I didn't know where Wuhan, China was, right? I had to look it up. That's the first time we heard about it. And that's when things started to take a dive. But it's still positive. Retail sales, this one I love, 4.7 trillion. That's what it was in 2015 and grew to 5.4 trillion in 2019. By 2019, e-commerce is 7.1% of retail in 15. By 19, it grows to 10.5% of retail. Again, this is really predictable. Like we can just take these ratios and just apply them, to the next year as we're doing our forecasts. We understand how much equipment we need to buy, how much we should scrap, what the rates are going to be, demand, all those things. This is a nice environment. Next. Oh, and the Fed's funding is really close to between 0 and 0.5%. Actually, this whole time, we're pretty close to zero. The Fed raised the rate 0.5 to 0.5. I want to say in 2019. I might have been into 2018. Somebody can look that up on ChatGPT and tell me the year. Yes, ma'am.
Do you differentiate between home sales to consumers and corporate buyers for rental companies?
It just home sales in general doesn't matter to me. If they turn over, they're going to do something to them. Yeah. Okay, next. The churn, you can predict is very stable. It's steady. We're running about 30% long-term lease. That's what LTL means. That's really good. Long-term lease does for us is de-risk the business. So someone's going to commit to a time, usually 36 months, up to 60 months, that they're going to take that piece of equipment. The rate is fixed. The time is fixed. The credit is good. We hope, we pray every time they go out, and they're going to pay us. And that de-risks sort of, the future for us. About 30% is where you want to be because you have rate flexibility depending on the environment we're in. So we're really good there. And our overall utilization is running between 83 and 88. That's also really good, right? Because I have these other pieces of equipment that don't rent 90 to 100% of the time. So flatbeds rent less, but you get more for them. Refrigerated trailers, the seasons aren't as long as drive-in. So some of that specialized stuff will sit longer, but we get a higher rate for it. So we're okay with that utilization. And there might be one more. Oh, and the biggest problem with trucking during this time is there's not enough seated drivers, right? Trucking's biggest problem is truck drivers. This is a key point. If there's not enough truck drivers, do you need more trailers or less trailers? No, you need more trailers, right? Because you don't have time for that driver to sit at a dock and wait to be loaded and unloaded. The driver's got to drop whatever they're pulling and go pick something up and go. So the trailer to tractor ratio is driven up during this period of time of expansion. Sales are expanding, home sales are very steady, manufacturing's really good. It's a really nice, stable environment. You have a constraint, it's the driver. The only way to really overcome that is to provide them more equipment so that the 10 hours they can drive during the day, the federally mandated 10 hours, they actually drive 10 hours, right? Productivity and efficiency of the drive was really important. Okay, that's a key point. We're going to come back to that. Next. Okay, now we're going to 2020. So now pandemic. This is the next major crisis of my life. I'm on the phone with the state of Texas for the first time ever, talking to him. Just 18 people in the company, which is kind of surreal. And saying, Governor, you can shut the state down. He's like, there's no way to shut the state down. You have to, okay. Well, economies are closing based on political affiliation. That's also something that's never happened. It's crazy. It's a disease. People are dying. But that's what happened. So let's go back and look at history and try to make some sense of it all and see if we can use that to predict what may happen in the future. But that's what happened. Manufacturing PMI, it contracted below 50 like right now. I mean, everybody is canceling everything. So, including me, I'm in the business at this point in time. I had a lot of different career paths. There's like $100 million of RV inventory on order. I called every manufacturer we did business with and canceled 2/3 of the orders, like overnight. You think, I mean, it got everybody's attention, right? This is a major, major crisis. We don't know what's going on. But my answer to them was, the government of the state of Texas just shut the state down. Be open. So there's no need for you to send these. Nobody's going to take them in. And we sure as heck can't sell them. So this is a major problem. Okay, next. So Compass is the other company that I work for. I ran the central region. There was 25 stores in 5 states. We had 450 employees. We furloughed 80% of our people. Everybody was doing that. Everybody was sending people home. The service side of the economy collapses. Like, you can't go to a restaurant. You can't get on a ship to go on a trip. You can't even get a hotel room. Like, it was this weird time, right? And manufacturing's crumbling next. So rates go 5, they'll go right back to 0. There's a massive government stimulus that gets thrown on top of that. That happens like super fast. This is even faster than 2008 and 9. It took the government a minute to figure out quantitative easing, and Bernanke using his bazooka of cash to stabilize the economy. Probably that was the lesson we learned in 8 and 9, is don't wait that long. If you do, you have a major problem on your hands. So get cash in people's hands as quick as you can, which, to the government's credit, that's what they did. We ran up a ton of debt. You can look what happened to the balance sheet or the national debt during the COVID crisis, but we throw a bunch of cash to people. 80% of them, if everyone does what I did, they're sitting at home. I mean, it's not a flood. It's not a major fire. The internet still works. I mean, Amazon still says they'll ship stuff to us. So what do you do with all that government cash? You start spending, is what happens. So by June, states reopened their economy. Since the development of the state of Texas, and we screwed up. We closed down for 60 days. That was a giant mistake. We're open. Right. Overnight, all the dealerships are open. We opened up the economy on a Friday. On Saturday, we had hundreds of people on the lots. Like 80% of the people are still. I'm calling our HR folks going, hey, 80% of the folks we just let go, we need them all back. Yeah, guess what? About, I don't know, 40% of them came back. The rest of them were gone, and they were gone forever. And everyone's having the same problem, by the way, which is going to disrupt supply chains. So if you're in the manufacturing business and all the orders got canceled, you lay off workers, right? If you're in the hotel business or the restaurant business, those places just closed. We're open. So those people are all in the wind, right? And we're competing for the same folks, by the way. So GDP, the demand for housing is exposed. So I guess I call this manufacturer, hey, can you give me those orders back? Which was a weird conversation. Like, just kidding. Sorry. Some of them gave them back to me, some of them didn't, but we did what we could to get inventory during this time. So orders get resubmitted. Housing booms during this period. There was reason for that because you couldn't go on vacation. So if you went on vacation and you had to do it, that's when you do it, because interest rates were really low. So housing goes to 6.45 million, and GDP jumps to over 6% in the second half of 2019. First, never seen this before. Like, man. And just like I said, during that really difficult time in 2009, coming out of 2008, it felt like it was never going to end. This feels like it's never going to end. Yeah, but it does. Okay, keep going. So all these factors, we're struggling to get people back. Now we have big time supply chain problems. You can't get components to build things. So you think that tonnage would spike. It actually didn't. It goes up a little bit and it kind of stays flat from 2019 to 2020. But the TEUs, this is really important. It grows, and retail continues to grow, with e-commerce growing to 14.5% of sales. And we'll talk more about what retail does here in a second. Go ahead, next. So here's a big thing, right, that happens in the trucking industry. The average load, drops by almost 50%. So during that really stable time, between 15 and 19, average trailer load is roughly 30,000 pounds, 15 tons, and it's going a little over 500 miles. That's average. During COVID, we dropped to 15 to 18,000 pounds, a lot of packages, and the average miles drops to less than 500. What does that do to the amount of equipment you need? It's going way up, right? I got to put less weight in the same amount of trailer. I got a problem. I need more. I need more equipment. So this puts a huge strain on trucking capacity. Trailer needs grow big time. Tractors grow slightly because drivers are still the constraint. Remember that? That's still our biggest problem in the industry. However, the average wage is being driven up, which leads us to the next bullet. Carriers are now entering the market, and those full the services business, the restaurant, hotel, cruise line business, well, they get a CDL in 90 days. They enter as truck drivers. So for the first time ever in my history in this business, we have solved the truck driver shortage problem. Problem solved, right? We'll see.
Well, can I,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So this is the first time, well, kind of the first time I've, someone like you had mentioned the amount of weight that's inside trucks decrease. And I've seen that mostly like on retail trucks, you know, Walmart and Kroger, little minivans, but you got 20-foot trailers,
53-foot trailer.
53-foot trailers, and you're saying that on these trailers, the weight is also decreasing.
Big time.
Is it because consumers are buying less at a time?
No, they're buying lighter stuff. They're buying packages from Amazon. There's only so much cube in the trailer, right? Either the load's out, or the cube's out. We're cubing out because the loads are lighter, because people are shopping on Amazon and they're getting stuff sent to their homes because you can't go to a retail store. Anyway, whatever. I'm using Amazon as a primary example because everybody knows what Amazon is, but it's everybody. Everybody's doing this. The average weight drops, but remember, tonnage stayed flat. So the tonnage didn't drop. The total amount of tons going through the system didn't become less, but the average weight per trailer almost 50% less. You need a lot more equipment to move that. Yeah, that's what happened. And that's why there was such a demand for trucking, because you would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. 2018, just fine. It's tonnage moving through the system. The average weight was 30,000 pounds and we were going 500 miles. Now we're going less miles and we weigh half, almost half in 2018. That's your issue.
And you predict that that's going to kind of continue for a little bit.
Look at that. Yeah, I'm going to get to 2026. Okay, so now we go to 2022. Truck tonnage it's increasing slightly in both 20 and 22. Nothing crazy. What drives trucking is a significant increase in team in 2022, which goes from 20.9 in 20 to 24.6 million in 2021. Everything's happening in the retail sales. Yeah, it's going nuts. 24.3 million in 2022. Huge increase in what's coming in on cargo ships. Next. Housing peaks in 2020 at 6.8. It's the highest number of homes ever sold in 1 year in the United States. Ever. That's driving trucking. It stays strong in 22, goes to 5.67 million in 2022. And that's mostly because the Fed, that other metric that we pay attention to, goes from 0% interest rates in the beginning of 2022 and raises to 4.5% by the end. And that's having a significant impact on mortgage rates. So that's why housing is starting to drop. Manufacturing also starts to turn down in the second half of 2022, but retail sales for the first time ever surpassed 7 trillion. That's crazy to me. What did I say in 2019? Like 5 trillion? That's a significant increase in just 2 years. Okay, next. Trucking continues to surge, more carriers are entering, and trailer production accelerates. This is interesting. Accelerates from COVID levels. So remember, 200,000 a year, it drops to like 70,000 in 2020, and they're trying to build back up. They can only build 167,000 in 21 and 188,000 in 2022. And that's not because they didn't want to build the capacity to build more. They couldn't get the components to build more, which is actually a good thing for us, especially when we get into this post-COVID period. And OTR and cartage, by the way, it peaks. It's up over 2 million now. So it's never been this high in the history of trucking. So we have 2 million total cartage dry vans available. And demand for loan lease units goes off the charts, right? That middle-tier trucker, these are new entrants into the market. They can't get trailing equipment. They can't go to Hyundai or Wabash and try to buy equipment. They'd laugh at them. The only way you can get equipment is to come to a company like ours, right? And the big players, the extras and the premiers and the milestones of the world, they've got slots. They've already taken up their portion of the 165 and the 188. So if you want them, you sign long-term leases at really high rates. This is going to impact us later down the road too. Okay, now we're on 23, 24. Post-COVID, crisis is over. Massive inflation. The Federal Reserve raises rates by 25 basis points 4 more times in 2023. February, March, May, July, ultimately settling in at 5.5%. It's the highest the rates have been in, 25 years. Massive. Manufacturing PMI contracts below 50, and the manufacturing goods side of the economy is grinding over in 2023. Next. Housing volume in 23 dropping to 4.67 from 688 to 467. I bet you if you were a real estate agent in a 6.88 million market, you probably, if you were going to buy a Ferrari, that was the time to do it. Yeah. And then it drops again in 2024 by another 240,000 units. Retail sales continue to grow to 7.2 trillion in 2023 and 7.5 trillion in 2024. And e-commerce as a percent of retail grows further. It gets 15.3 million in 23 and 16.1 in 2024. So much retail sales. We started, it was like around 8%. So it's doubled as a percentage of retail, and retail sales have gone up a ton. No pun intended. But also imported containers are starting to drop, right? So we're going to burn through that inventory. So this is why we look at this. So we dropped to 21, 23, increased it back to 24 million in 2024. And retail inventories expanded slightly in 2024 because the consumer started to cool off a little bit. But inventory today, even then, was at all-time lows at a 10.1 turn rate. It's the highest turn rate in a decade. So does anyone know what that means? 10.1 turn rate? So it means if I have $1 of inventory, I would expect to turn it 10 times in a year. So if I was going to look at that from a month's supply standpoint, retail sales on a month's supply basis, you have just over a month's supply of inventory on hand. So from a supply chain perspective, you better be real time or you're going to miss sales. Yeah, which is what's happening, by the way. They're missing sales. Go ahead. And GDP continues to expand. It was this huge increase in rates. GDP continues to go up. Unemployment remains low. Inflation's coming down. The Fed keeps rates high, which starts this rolling durable goods recession that we've been in. The services side of the economy just comes back strong after being completely shut down during COVID. They went from whatever to zero. On the durable goods side, we didn't shut down. We didn't go to zero. It dropped pretty significantly, but it didn't go to zero. And then it came back hard because all you could do was consume, right? You couldn't go anywhere. So services weren't in. So that's what happens. When you get to 2025, I'm going to take this through August with a couple of updates. So interest rates, even through August of 2025, remain stubbornly high. But I believe the probability for rate cuts is increasing late Q3 or Q4. We just got our first one last week. The Fed lowered by 25 basis points. So now the Fed funds rate's 4. It was 0 for 20 plus years. I don't think it should go to 0, by the way, but they're still too high. Retail is still growing, and e-commerce as a percent of sales is still growing. Still in 2025, sales are up about 2% from 2024. So they're going to surpass, I don't know, with 7.8 trillion, something like that. Huge number. PMI manufacturing PMI is still over 50. 30 low now. The high 40s, got as high as 49. It pulled back to 48 again last month. But employment is still strong. So this is the crazy thing. Real wages are up from 2019 at those levels, and they honestly outpaced inflation that happened during COVID. So people generally have money to spend on durable goods when they start spending. They've just been conditioned to this low interest rate environment for so long. That's the only thing I can say. Until something breaks, like, if you're hitting the brakes in your house, you don't care what the interest rates are. But I could put off buying a car for a couple of years, most likely, if I feel interest rates or tariffs, we can talk about that too, after are going to impact the price of what I'm about to buy. Next. Administration with a conflicting policy. The big which passed over the summer, that's a net stimulus to the economy, right? So everyone was really excited when that passed. And then there's tariff news, which becomes a drag, and they almost negate one another. The GDP is still expanding, although slowing. And I think actually the tariff pull ahead that happened in the beginning of the year brought in more TEUs and more imported product in advance of tariffs taking effect that impacted GDP. So we might see a decline here in the last couple of quarters. But OTR in the cartage fleet is shrinking during this period of time. So no one's bought anything for the last couple of years. That 180,000 production, that's the highest it ever got. It's shrunk, to 140, and in this year they're going to do about 110,000 total units being built. So that inventory of available units is coming way down, and you can't turn that back with a flip of a switch. It's going to take time to build production back into the system. And the tonnage index is still below the 2022 peak. So we're going to come in a little bit higher than in 25 than we did in 24, which is going to be about 11.8 billion tons of trucking tonnage. It peaked during COVID at almost 13 billion. Okay. And housing is stalled. We're still running at a 4.5 million unit pace. So we're off. You just do the math now, we're off like a couple million units a year for three years. I mean, that's a lot of houses that didn't turn over. That's really impacting supply chain. It's impacting manufacturing. It's impacting trucking. Okay, so there's this big picture. I just took you through all this history of pretty stable time to the beginning of a crisis and the disruption that caused. Post-crisis, you got to pay the piper. All the overconsumption that happened during COVID is got to get paid for, and that's what's happening right now on the manufacturing and durable goods side of the economy. But finally, I think we are starting to see some relief. I do think the trucking industry is off the bottom and starting to head in the right direction. So most likely, we will see a reduction in the overall Fed funds rate to what I'll call GDP levels, which would be neutral. We would call that a neutral rate. If you could get the Fed funds rate equal to GDP, it's a neutral Fed funds rate, which is where we need to be as a country. So that before we got the 25 basis point cut we got would have been a 2.5 to 3% rate is what we'd be looking for, which would be 150 to 200 basis points lower than where we were that day. It's about 150 or it's 100 to 150 now that we have to get lower. Mortgage rates drop below 5%, which will finally stimulate existing home sales. The spring market is at risk. So it depends what the Fed does. The balance of this year, if we can get another 50 basis points in cuts by December, so you hope for 25 in November and 25 in December, I think that sets us up for a pretty good spring real estate market, because you probably will get a cut in January. You might get one in February, but January, I think for sure, or maybe not January, February. And then we'll have a decent spring market. If we don't get any cuts, though, the real estate market's at risk, because all that real estate gets sold in spring. That's just what happens, right? So that's a risk that we have to pay attention to. And what you got to pay attention to too. So just talk about the Fed funds rate here really quick, and then I'll get on to the next slide. But the Fed can only control the short end of the curve, right? It's a very, very short-term rate. It's what banks have to pay when they lend money to one another. It's that plus SOFR, and it's what the Fed. So that's basically what it is. It does impact the 10, which is what mortgage rates are based off of, but it doesn't control the 10-year rate. But the Fed can control the 10-year rate by buying 10-year treasuries. So this is a complicated financial argument. So if you next time in your finance class, ask your professor how this happens. But that's what they do. They load up the Fed's balance sheet with 10-year treasuries, which in effect solves a demand problem and ultimately lowers that rate. Right. So there's two ways that they can control the long end, the short end and the long end of rates. I believe that that's what's going to happen, especially with our current administration. Okay, so housing, reshoring will drive manufacturing PMI above 50. Retail sales will continue to grow. Nothing's going to change there. Next. Lower rates will also maintain U.S. auto sales to about today. We're coming about 15.3 million units today. Tariffs are going to meet demand. Tariffs are going to impact auto sales. The tonnage index will start to rebound. Excess trailer capacity gets absorbed, growing the appetite for long-term leases. Most carriers will be reluctant to invest in rolling stock and focus on tractors and seated drivers. Seated drivers is still the biggest problem in trucking. Those drivers that got seated during COVID are leaving. They're going back to the service side of the economy. They can't make any money in trucking right now. So the long-term forecast in trucking is to be at 14 billion tons by 2030. Might get there sooner, but that's where we're headed. Trailer production grows, but costs remain high due to steel and aluminum tariffs. So anything that's idle that's 0 to 3 years old today, that's going to get sucked up very quick in long-term leases. And OEM production is going to be somewhere between 150 and 180, again, because the cost of the trailer is so much more than it was pre-COVID. It's giving everybody pause. They're going to go spend their money on tractors. Next. And progress in 2026, I believe, sets up a 5-year trucking expansion with total drive-in, the total drive-in fleet required to move the tonnage in the system between 2 and 2.3 million, which is, by the way, where we peaked during COVID. Natural demand is going to get us right back to that point. And we'll enter a more stable environment. So just kind of summing all this up, strong foundations, positive market, the economy will slowly improve, housing will recover. This will be driven by lower interest rates, rising to a net neutral level. New investment in U.S. manufacturing through reshoring and nearshoring will continue. This pushes U.S. tonnage up toward 14 billion plus by 2030. And by the way, remember that tractor to trailer ratio we talked about? Every billion tons of freight requires an additional 170 to 200,000 drive-ins to move. Go back. Key metrics, weight of average load and average distance and seated drivers are things we have to pay attention to. I don't think we're getting heavy. We think it's slightly heavy, but we're not going back to 30,000 pounds. Last thing I tell you is if you chose supply chain as a career path, you picked a good one. It's going to be good for a long time. 26, I think, is going to be very good. 27 is going to be outstanding. So that's all I have. Take any questions. Thank you. I tried to go as fast as I could.
So I'll ask you a question then. 80% of the people, let's say at Compass that you let go, what were they? That was everybody, right?
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only we can keep was a skeleton crew of technicians because when RV broke, we had to fix it. That's it. Sales were gone. Even the parts guys were gone. Yes.
Like any semester?
Yeah.
How would you go about applying for jobs for your position? Like entry?
It's taking a while to get to my position. Just, it's hiring entry level positions now. What I tell you is, I'm optimistic. The data is on your side. College graduates, like 90% of them find jobs within 6 months of graduation, right? So that's just a fact. It's something that's tracked. That's number one. So knowing that, I would say focus on where you company that's going to invest in you, be positively energizing, they're out there. Go interview or talk to as many people as you can. Go tap into your alumni network. Here, I mean, I'm an alumni of a few different schools. Anyone contacts me from those schools, I'll talk to them and tell them anything they want to know. You guys can contact me if you want. In fact, I'm on LinkedIn. Yes, you can request a LinkedIn connection with me. I'll accept it. Yeah, and you can use my network. Yeah.
Do you think autonomous trucking is gonna affect this industry?
Yeah, so we're trying to solve the seated driver problem through technology. I just think it has a long way to go. You know, I was on the autonomous trucking committee for the American Trucking Association for 3 years. Eventually solve the problem. But then I think about our business. If those trucks can truly drive autonomously, they will need a seated driver, which is very scary to me. But let's just say that that happens. Stuff is still got to get loaded in the back of a trailer. I think that requires more equipment, not less equipment, right? And those, in theory, those tractors can run 24 hours a day. What's going to happen is things will come off different modes of transportation. The most efficient mode of transportation is trucking. You probably learned that. It's also the most expensive, right? So if you load stuff on a train now, you're doing it because it's cheap, but it moves bulky stuff from point to point. It's got to go over 500 miles. You got to move within 100 miles of a ramp to make it make sense. If you don't have all that stuff, and eventually, by the way, it's going to get on a truck. You're just trying to minimize the time it's on a truck. If it gets cheaper to run over the road with autonomous vehicles, that's what will happen. It'll come off the train and onto the road. That's what I think.
Yeah, loads will continue to be lighter. Crazy idea.
Yeah.
Investing in like $30,000 diesel trucks. Why not just get a fleet of F-350s or something, or better gas mileage, lower maintenance, and put a trailer on it?
Well, because it's still, the trailer itself is about 12,000 pounds. You're going to load 15,000 pounds on it, right? So you have 27,000 pounds that you're rolling down. Yeah, that F-450 won't do it. Yeah.